Well, hi everyone, and welcome to another show of Ask and Wonder. This is the show that brings Christian and secular thinkers in order to talk about the biggest questions in life. And as you know, and due to COVID-19, of course, Ask and Wonder became a online show now. And of course, the podcast is back as well. So we're very excited about that. And today I have here with us our friend, Joel Diemoz. How are you, my friend?
Pedro, I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited about this conversation. Joel is a friend of mine, secular thinker, incredible person with an incredible story. And we are going to be talking today on the topic, am I wrong and how can I know it? And before we go into the conversation, just wanted to say a few things about Ask and Wonder. So as you know, now you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and more interviews are going to be coming up, challenging my and other Christian thinkers' thoughts and secular thinkers' thoughts too. And also you have the podcast and you can find the podcast and subscribe to it on iTunes and also Google Play. And it is just the version of the show, but the audio version, so you can listen to it while you're doing other things. That's a nice thing to do also. And there are many things coming up in the future. Also, I wanted to remind you of the fact that if you like the show and you would like to support it, you can do it by Patreon. And I want to thank all those donors at this moment that are supporting the show. Thank you very much. These conversations not only challenge us, but also it kind of in the whole thing makes an example for others to mimic in the future, so that they see that actually these conversations can happen and we can really, really, truly challenge each other. But at the same time, we can do it. We can do it out of respect and just to put thoughts together in order to forward critical thinking, no matter our worldview. So after I said all this, so I'm very excited to start this conversation. So Joel, I would like to start asking you just a few questions about who you are and what you do. So what would you like to tell us about you?
My name's Joel Diemoz, like Pedro already mentioned. I study philosophy up at Austin Peay State University up here in Clarksville. I'm a senior. I actually graduate in December, which I'm pretty excited about. Why I chose philosophy, I think because, well, to me, there's nothing that's more interesting than those deep, perhaps unanswerable questions. And I wanted to, get a formal education in the methodology of making some inroads on those questions, or at least understanding what the best minds that humanity had to say about these deep eternal questions. I think my primary interests are metaethics, so ethical knowledge. How can we say we're right or we're wrong in regards to moral truth? I enjoy political theory a lot. Not so much like applied politics, like like the kind you'd see on like MSNBC or Fox News. I like more the abstract reasoning that kind of underpins and influences those applied narratives that maybe people aren't even really sure are how those work or how they influence their own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
My background, you want a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, definitely, man.
Sure. So before I was a student, I was in the infantry. I was in the Army for 5 years. 101st Airborne. That's what brought me down to Tennessee and what allowed me to eventually meet Pedro. I went to Afghanistan. Had fun. Stood in some guard towers. Walked around some mountains. And I got out and decided to, I guess, put down the sword and pick up the pen, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And Joel, have you always had a passion for philosophy, or is this something that happened after you had the experience in Afghanistan?
I think it's something that I was always interested in. I didn't know that it was something that I wanted to study seriously until after I got out of the Army, because before I was in the military, I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to do or what I wanted to study. But I think it as a topic, it's always interests me. I've always enjoyed reading about it. And I'm lucky I get the chance, thanks to old Uncle Sam, to to take a deep dive. I think it's a privilege to me. I think that like lots of people probably would want to study philosophy, but maybe couldn't because they would, I don't know, felt like they had to be an accountant, or just never had the chance to go to school at all for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think philosophy is just beautiful, and there are so many applications. People, there are many reasons. This would take us to talk about a whole different topic, but I think there's so many applications for philosophy today, and it's so needed. And the fact that actually philosophy started to branch out, the philosophy of mathematics, the philosophy of history, the philosophy, just because it's not all about facts. It's actually what do we do once we have those facts, and thinking about the facts, the way we do, where do those thoughts can take us, So it is just incredible. So I'm glad. I have another question for you. So um, the reason why you like philosophy, could you explore a little bit more of that with us? So what is the search? Why do you like those deep questions?
Sure. So I'll contrast philosophy with something like science, right? Science is a specific methodology that's used to answer specific questions. Applied like geometry, right? Like something that an engineer would use to build a bridge, right? Is another example. Philosophy to me is the most pure form of reason. There really isn't like sort of an established methodology in the same way as you would find in mathematics or you would find in science. And it's at a disadvantage because the methodology of science actually is really, really good for discovering natural truths, right? Applied geometry is really, really good for parsing out the sort of the depth and width and all that sort of things about our physical space. Philosophy doesn't have that methodology, but it's also not constrained to any one particular area, right? There are some questions that science cannot answer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's any question that philosophy can't answer in theory or in principle.
Huh.
I think there's questions that philosophy is not the best way to go about it, if we have other tools at our disposal, but I don't think that it's necessarily hamstrung into one particular type of question that it seeks to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting also for me when I read and I read a little bit about philosophy every day to realize that in the past, the role of the philosopher and the scientist was one role. It seems that it started to branch off in the 15th or 16th century, maybe, when the people started to see those things like two completely different things. So I still think that scientists, when they go to the laboratory and they actually consider what the world is and the way it could be described, they're doing philosophy too. So what do you think about that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question for me?
So what I think that scientists today, they're still philosophers. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, so my sister Kayla Diemoz, she has her PhD in chemistry, and she's not like an academic per se. She's in the private sector. She still does research, so I still think she counts as a scientist. But we have those conversations a lot about the intersection of science and philosophy. I don't know. I think that there's if we were to do a poll, I think that there would be a fair amount of scientists that would be skeptical of philosophy, skeptical of the usefulness of philosophy. But I think that there are lots of people that are skeptical of philosophy. But I think that there would be a fair amount that would hopefully understand, at the very least, the philosophical underpinnings that prop up science, right? Because science isn't an applied philosophy. It's as you pointed out, the 1500s and 1600s, guys like Francis Bacon, right, that were both brilliant scientists, but we also study them in philosophy for what they contributed to empiricism, epistemology, and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I don't know how the scientists would view
Yeah.
would view the philosopher. I actually think that quite a few would be skeptical. I think that, have you heard of the phrase scientism?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Right. Yeah. So perhaps when you get to that high a level, if you have a PhD in a science, you might have a little bit of that bias. For people that don't know, scientism is basically the undue uh, faith in science. How I understand it, or how I describe it, is applying science where it probably shouldn't be applied, and believing that you can get answers when you probably can't, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, just one more comment about that. That is very interesting. I remember Peter Atkins he's a secular thinker and a chemist from Oxford University. He has written many books, and I remember he was the first secular thinker and scientist that I heard saying, "Yeah, keep doing your philosophy while I actually keep discovering reality through the scientific method." Like that type of thinking. That was so interesting to me. But so Joel, thank you very much for that, and we support you, my friend. Keep studying philosophy. That's just such a beautiful endeavor right there. So our question today is, am I wrong, and how can I know it? The reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is because, of course, definitely we see the world in different terms. I am a follower of Christ and former atheist, and one of the things that I do every day, and this is not a hyperbole, I truly try to read or be challenged by things that I read and see every day, just a little bit, because I think I still have a little bit of skepticism, because that's just the very nature of what being a human is. I really want to keep asking questions about reality. And when I wake up in the morning and I go, wow, I believe in God, I believe in a mind that is intrinsic and extrinsic, inside and outside of space and time, and there's this mind that created me with a purpose. Those are big claims, and I always want to know if I want to know if I'm right about it. So before getting to my worldview, I would like to ask you about yours. So would you tell us a little bit about how you see the world? And then when I express also, I'll tell you about my worldview a little bit, how I got to think the way I do. We'll get to the discussion as to whether it is possible that we can be wrong about what the things that we think about. So would you tell us a little bit about your worldview, Joe?
Sure, certainly. So I'm going to caveat all this with the statement. I think my worldview is constantly in flux, and I'm not afraid to say that. I don't know if if I've learned enough, or I'm confident enough in any one of my beliefs to say definitively that I'm very near positive that this is the way it is. This segment of reality. I'm just not there yet, and I don't know if I'll ever be there. Like you said, I think some level of skepticism, some reasonable level of skepticism is, it should always be there. It keeps us honest, so to say. It keeps us, from creating an echo chamber. For the purpose of the question, I will be arguing for a form of foundationalism. So as I'm taking the question is, how do I know I could be wrong? Well, wrong about what? And I don't think you guys want to hear about how I could be wrong about, what I should have for dinner. I think what we're trying to get at is the interesting bits, right? The really the fundamental bits. Foundationalism basically posits that there are certain properly basic beliefs that are at the very bottom of the sort of pyramid or hierarchy of beliefs. So if you think about something really, really mundane, like I said, like what should I have for dinner? Is it wrong to have 18th century baked onions for dinner? That's sort of at the peak, right? Way at the bottom, all right, these foundational, these properly basic beliefs, they don't necessarily have truth values. I should caveat this. They have truth values. They could be true or false, but the truth value doesn't necessarily matter, right? For example, a properly basic belief would be other minds exist, right? I don't have any way, at least as I see the world, of knowing categorically if other minds exist. But I hold it as a properly basic belief that other minds exist. This allows me to basically to function in the world, right? To be a sort of a living, breathing human being in society without letting this sort of, like, I don't know, rampant nihilism or just extreme skepticism take over, right? Now, it could be the case that I'm wrong in my properly based belief that you guys actually don't exist. There's no other minds that don't exist. But I don't think that it necessarily matters. If I'm sort of caught in an illusion, I at least want to have a good time in the illusion, and that assumes that other minds exist, right? I'd be really lonely if they didn't.
Yeah. And would you tell us a little bit more about those foundational beliefs? What are those? You mentioned a little bit, for example, about ethics. Perhaps you have more. So how would you describe the world concerning these foundational beliefs? What do you think those things? What do you think is true, and what do you think is not?
Okay. So the important thing with the properly basic belief is that you're chasing it back to the point that you're really at a question that you can't answer, right? Mm-hmm. So there are lots of questions that we don't know the answer to, but I could at least conceive of a way, or perhaps a smarter person could conceive of a way that they could be answered. Mm-hmm. There are some beliefs that really, really seem to be unanswerable. The example that I gave is other minds. Another example might be the problem of induction, right? And there's lots of ways to answer this question. So if still philosophy nerds out there that think I'm giving a poor account of the problem of induction as a properly basic belief, I apologize. But
would you just describe for a second what the problem of induction is for me and for those that
sure.
don't know?
So induction is a form of logic, right? And when you make an inductive reasoning, you're still leaving open the possibility that you could be wrong. So, for example, if I was a scientist and I wanted to study geese, the color of geese, right? And I looked at 99 geese, and I published a report being like, hey, I studied 99 geese, they're all white. My conclusion is all geese are white, right? Now, that might not be the best, most thorough scientific experiment or whatever, but it's just meant to illustrate the problem. When you're making an extrapolation from sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 into a general statement, that's an induction. Mm-hmm. And we have to do that, right? To some extent or another. I mean, science in itself is based on induction. Yeah. When they make observations and conclusions from those observations. So two examples of the properly based beliefs: other minds exist, and that I can extrapolate from a certain set and make a general statement.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to interrupt you. You said
no worries. I'll try to be quick. You mentioned morality as an example of a properly based belief, but actually for me, I don't think that there's no there's theoretical underpinnings that lead to morality, but there's not a applied moral rule that I hold as a properly based belief. Mm-hmm. I get to morality some other way.
So then let me push you a little bit further with this. So when you talk about the way you live your life, when you wake up in the morning and the things that you do and all of this, do you see truth in what you do? Or where do you get your meaning in order to do the things that you do? Or is there just there's perhaps a dormant skepticism concerning the things that you do? You do them because they work well, but then after that, you're actually not sure if things should be the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so well, I think as I mentioned, I think there's always some level of skepticism.
Hmm.
Now, will I say when I wake up, I would love to tell you that yes, I'm a truth seeker 100% of the time. That I wake up and my mission is to really understand reality as it is. And that's honestly that's not the case for me. I don't think that's the case for anybody. I make an effort to try to understand reality as it is. I think that's what draws me to philosophy is in part is trying to understand
Hmm.
reality as it is. But sometimes comfortable deceptions are necessary or perhaps not necessary. I dabble in them, right? I
Hmm.
think everybody does, right? I couldn't imagine a person that like would never lie to themselves about anything, right?
Hmm.
I mean, so let me give you an example here. I lie to myself when I'm on my morning run. I lie to myself about how good I'm going to do in my next soccer season, right? Um, if I was really applying like my critical thinking and my skepticism, I would probably acknowledge that no, I'm not going to be the best player in the league, right? Um, but you know what? That doesn't help me get through my run.
Hmm.
So I
So
hope that answers the question.
yeah. So Joel, so concerning, for example, I know that you have told me that you're saying that in terms of morality, you, for example, you don't say, well, we're still well, that's actually an entire other conversation, but it seems that it's not foundational for you. But when it comes to critical thinking and skepticism, um, there are some people that are skeptics. They think that the ultimate question for all of this is actually skepticism. Like there's actually no ultimate answer for anything. It just if you find something that is going to lead you to think about other things, and there's no ultimate, find there. So I don't know if we should call that agnostic. No, actually, no. Let's forget about that. So my question for you, Joel, then is when you apply your critical thinking and skepticism about these huge topics, let's talk about, for example, morality. You think that there's actually an answer, or there's a continual search for something that actually is not going to be known, or it's something that can be known? Where are you in that spectrum of belief?
Sure. So are you talking about like a nihilist, like an epistemic nihilist?
Uh, per- Perhaps, yeah. Just wanted to know if you actually, when you say concerning, for example, morality, well, actually, I don't know at this point. Is this a final? Is this a final answer for you, or there's actually you think that there is actually an actual answer for the way people should actually behave?
So okay, well, in terms of morality, I think there's a best answer. Or at least there's a theory that I argue for that I think is the best answer. In terms of epistemology or in terms of knowledge, or you know what, I'll wield this against all nihilism. And anyone that makes this like really obtuse like um, sort of appeal to incredulity, this really extreme nihilist, whether it be in the realm of epistemology or whether it be in the realm of morality, to me, that's just laziness, right?
Mm.
Um, so you've come up with the question, or at least you've come up with the problems with all the answers you've heard thus far, but that's only half the battle, right? To me, leaving it at nihilism or leaving it as we just we there's no possibility of any sort of answers in epistemology or in morality. It's to me it's laziness.
Yeah. Okay. So just to make sure, would you explain to us and to me especially what nihilism is?
Okay, so it's in terms of like the history of philosophy. Nihilism was actually really big in the early 1900s, right? And it was kind of a response to the classic modern philosophers, your Kants, your Descartes, right? Um, the nihilist basically rejects all that and has come to the conclusion that there is no answer, be it in epistemology, be it in knowledge, be it in morality. There's nothing there. The most classic example, the one that I think of, is moral error theory. And that's, it comes from the early 1900s, and that's basically it posits that all moral claims aren't just wrong, but they cannot be wrong. So they're neither true nor false. They're not truth-carrying statements.
So when you, as a philosopher, Joel, when you actually search for these incredible answers to the biggest questions in life, do you have any expectations that you're going to have? You're going to find certain answers, or it is actually the good thing about this is just in the search?
So I think the romantic answer would definitely be the latter, right? It's the eternal struggle against the unknowable. But I think that philosophy has answered questions before, right? At least in terms of describing natural truth or describing mathematical truths, or there's a lot of areas where I think most reasonable people can come to the conclusion that we have made progress on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't ever want to rule out that we could get an answer ever. I just think that probably is very unlikely.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that?
Gosh, I mean, I think there are certain limitations on human cognition, right? There could be, and even like when we're talking about really abstract, like phenomenology or sort of like existential thought, right? I think we kind of run into those roadblocks of human cognition. How can I'm trying to come up with a good example, but I'm
But
drawing a
you're
blank.
giving, you're contextualizing it really well. My thing about all of this is that while we are actually searching, or we're not finding, or we're finding, there is actually a world that is happening, right? Like there's something. That's where I started thinking about all these things. The ultimate question in philosophy, it seems to be, of course, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, why is there something rather than nothing, right? But my question, in order to be interested in these topics, was why don't we start with a question, is there something rather than nothing? And the answer is yes, there is something. So that's the first question that I asked myself as a former atheist, right? I said it was an atheist / agnostic, meaning I didn't truly know that there wasn't a God, there wasn't a way for me to prove it. And of course, with a secular and atheist friends would say, yeah, we cannot prove also the existence of fairy tales. I don't think that is a good answer though, because we have, for example, for the existence of the Christian God, we have like 4,000 years of things that have happened that we don't have for fairy tales. So, like in terms of history and sociology, we have some some answers there. But so going back to the question. Is there something rather than nothing? And the answer is yes. So the question for me was, what do I do with this now? Because that is the inescapable question. There is something. And then when we come to describe the things that we see, why? I know that as soon as you put the question why, I mean, it's a necessary question. I think it's incredibly necessary. Some scientists, for example, would say that the why question shouldn't be asked because it presupposes sometimes the existence of an agent or some type of agency. But I think it's an important question. Why are things the way they are, right? So that's also a good question. And that is what actually pushed me to, to consider the hypothesis of the existence of God. So when it comes for you, thinking about, there is something, yes, there is something here. Perhaps, by the way, I don't want to assume anything. Do you think that there is something?
Yeah,
Okay,
of course.
okay.
I think we can get there by way of the cogito, right? I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
And if I am, then I am something. So at the very least, we can be sure that our own minds exist,
Cool.
for example. But yeah.
Okay, so then you said, since there is something, like for example, again, there are two topics that are interesting here. The first one that you mentioned that I don't know if we have time to pursue is of course morality. You would say I should behave in certain ways, but at the same time, when we get to the root of it, actually we're not. There are foundational beliefs, but if you ask me, perhaps how have we come to believe in these beliefs as foundational? Perhaps the answer would be more abstract. Do you have any thoughts concerning that?
Could you help me with the question just a little bit?
Yes, yeah. That I still need to learn how to do this better. But
Hey, it's hard. Trust me,
oh
it's
no,
hard.
no, it is, it is. So when, for example, when we talk, Joel, about foundational beliefs in morality, you think that there are things that are clear, perhaps, in terms of morality?
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question goes there. So those foundational beliefs, how do we come to believe that those are right or wrong? That would be the question for you.
Oh yeah. Okay. So with the foundational beliefs, they are, and again, like the nihilist. For me, the foundational beliefs, they aren't truth apt.
Mm,
So they could be right, they could be wrong. I have no way to investigate whether they're right or they're wrong. But I need to believe in them regardless to
mm,
make sense of the world. Um, and from those foundational beliefs, now I have something to basically to serve as a premise to make a logical syllogism, right?
okay,
Either by way of induction or deduction.
okay. And then this is so interesting, but I need to move a little bit forward. But wow, perhaps in the future we could talk about morality. Just for the sake, of course, of the conversation and because of the interest of the show, you came to actually believe at one point that there is no God, right? There's no entity doing anything or creating anything, right? Would you extend a little bit about this for us?
Yeah, I mean, this is getting into some, I guess, I don't know, a little bit of like personal history or whatever, but I don't mind, and maybe some people think it's interesting. But I was raised in sort of a middle of the road Protestant Methodist tradition.
Mm,
Um, I went to Circle C Ranch. It's like a youth outreach camp when I was a teenager, and they were very good at their jobs. From what I could tell, it seemed like they brought lots and lots of kids to Jesus, which is what they're trying to do, right? Um, but they argued that the Earth was 7,000 years old
mm,
and that evolution was false.
mm,
And that was the first moment for me when I was like, wait, because I'm like 12, 13 years old. I see it like an authority figure and an adult. At that point, I think it's the same for many other 12 or 13-year-olds. You believe, you trust authority figures, right?
mhm,
And that was kind of the egg cracking for me moment that like first injected doubt into me. And I never really did much with that doubt. Being an atheist, historically speaking, has not won you a lot of friends, right? Up until maybe, let's say, 300 years ago, you'd be put to death for it. And even still, there is there's a stigma that's associated with it with a lot of people. They think that you must be a moral nihilist, that you have no, I don't know, moral barometer or whatever. So I don't think I really was interested in like basically losing all my church friends. So I never like fully committed to being an atheist until I sort of became an adult and started to form my own identity, my own
mm,
opinion about the world. But I think that I just looked at the claims. I looked at basically the central claims of Christianity, the central thesis of Christianity, and I didn't find it compelling. I didn't find it believable. The arguments that were put forth to me, for example, all the apostles were put to death, never denying Jesus. Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about, the Haley's comet cult, right? They all put themselves to death, really sincerely believing that, that they were going to go to heaven beyond this comet. They drank the Kool-Aid, right? I don't necessarily think that somebody facing a death, even a terrible death, and not going back on their beliefs is necessary. It's indicative of how strongly they believe that they are right, but I don't think it's indicative that they are actually right. I think collective delusions. I think we have examples of collective delusions where there are groups of people that, perhaps in extraordinary circumstances, where they're like, where they're all tired and hungry and thirsty and worn out, not really in full mastery of their faculties, they could experience. They could all see like an island, right? Let's say we were all on like 6 of us on a raft together, and we're all dying of thirst. We could all experience a collective hallucination of an island.
The thing about that, which is very interesting, is would everyone have the same illusion, or everyone would see the island or the water in different colors? Because what it seems that happens is that everyone saw the same. But
I might push back a little bit on that notion. I think
definitely.
that there are differences in the Gospels. Now, are they so severe that we can say that they are definitely describing different events? Well, that's the rub, right? But I think there are at least differences, right?
Well, it is actually very cool that there are differences, because if we had 4 books saying exactly the same word by word, I think that would actually cause a problem for people like us that come to it and would say, well, the Gospels are the 4 books saying the same. I think this was concocted, right? It makes sense that, for me at least, that those books were written from different perspectives, and they were talking about things that actually happened. In the sense that, this is a very interesting topic for me. There are people that die because they think that they die thinking that the things that they're dying for are true. But something happened with Christianity, because 2,000 years ago, we find that for one reason or another, there are like 2 billion people in the world talking about this in different ways, but they're talking about this. And historically also, we have up to the beginning of the 4th century, we actually have accounts of what Christianity meant for people, what they did, and actually the reasoning behind of the things that they would do. It was all around this belief that Christ had resurrected. But well, yeah, that is all interesting. So of course, all this led you to say, well, there's no God, right?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself like a hard atheist, right? I would consider myself just an unconvinced non-believer. To be honest with you, depending on what kind of Christian God you're talking about and who's defining it, there are certainly versions of the Christian God that I would prefer if we're in the universe, right? I think I think the universe, our world, might be maybe a better, more just place if this certain version of this Christian God exists. But that doesn't, me wanting it to exist doesn't make it so. And there's lots of versions of the Christian God that people describe to me that I think like, wow, this guy just sounds like a tyrant, like a thug, right? But I mean, I guess that's a question of theology and
yeah, that is interesting. When I hear you talking about this, it is very interesting, because I see sometimes that this happens, which is, well, the first thing about all of this that I like is, you mentioned that there are different people that talk about the Christian God in different ways. This brings back a little bit what we talked about, skepticism. Like, do you expect that our skepticism, whatever that is actually the nature of reality, that we just don't know? That is what it is. But with the Christian God, I think, the way we think about it is actually one, is absolute. It's only one. Now, when it comes to understanding him, that is when the conversation becomes interesting. That you're going to hear people talking about him in different ways, coming from philosophy, from science, from experience, from history, from sociology. But there is the belief that there is actually one ultimate, a God that is one way, and that's the way he revealed himself to us, the way it is. So that is interesting to me also, because in terms of becoming humble, there are two things in the Bible. There are more, but two things in particular that I love, and they come from the Old Testament, not from the New Testament. There's a verse in the New, Old Testament, Joel, is Ecclesiastes 3:11, that goes, um, God has made everything beautiful in its time, and God has put eternity in the human hearts, but no one can fathom what he has done from beginning to end. Meaning like humanity, all as humans, we have a yearning from something that we understand that there could be the potentiality of something that is eternal, but in this state of being, we actually don't understand what it is. And then in Job, we have these 37 chapters, Job asking the why question about one of the biggest questions in life, which is, why is there evil here? And he's asking why and why and why and why. And when it comes to chapter 38, God comes and says, well, let me actually answer to you. And he in fact doesn't answer the question. He says, well, this is your problem, right? So what do you think about, do you actually think about the context of your problem? Do you actually know that how the earth is working, your reality works? Do you actually think about the heavens and the way it works? Do you think about reality? So what it does is, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to, how do you say this in English? Widening your perspective.
Your mind.
Yes. So that you actually realize that in your state of being now, answering your question is not actually possible. Like you were talking about this, and like it is not possible to answer some questions because of the nature of how things are. And I think from a Christian perspective, we actually know this in this state of being at this moment. Now, at the same time, we know that there's an answer, and we believe that there's one. You see what I'm trying to? What do you think about this? You want to challenge me with any of your thoughts?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I had a question written down before. It's throwing it back a little bit.
That is okay.
That was a good speech there. I think it was well articulated. I'm not going to ask a question about it.
That's okay.
Yeah. I'll throw it back to about 5 minutes ago. When it comes to using the deaths of the apostles as a premise to support the belief in Christianity.
Yeah.
Actually, let me phrase that to what the consistency of the narrative of the apostles. So you said because there seem to be describing the same sort of thing, we have reason to believe that what they're saying is true. I pointed out that there is some differences, and you said, well, there has to be some differences, or else it would be probably really sketchy. How do you, if that's I feel like it's almost having your cake and eating it too. So you're saying that we should believe it because they sound similar, but we should also believe it because there are differences. You see the tension I'm sort of getting at?
Yes,
You think
definitely.
they just kind of there's enough difference, or?
Well, I love that question so much. So the thing about this for me, Joel, is that I don't come to believe in Christianity because 11 people gave their lives to God. My problem as a person that all of a sudden just appears in this universe with a mind, and I'm with the possibility of asking questions is, why are they apostles? Like human beings with minds thinking about things. Why? So what? Why is there something rather than nothing, right? So when I talk about this, it's not like this is just something that is going to push you to believe in God. I think there is an incredible cumulative case that one can build in order to actually believe in God. At least to the point of deism, Like there is actually something that is outside of the system that make the system be the way it is. I think there is also an incredible case that one could make in order to posit the Christian God as the one that is truly the one that exists. It is not fair for me to say the Christian God, because when it comes to Christianity, it's like the way we understand God, that is the one that exists, meaning God is bigger than any of the concepts that we can concoct about him. It's like my God. That doesn't work like this. It doesn't work. It shouldn't have never worked that way. It's not the God of Christianity. Just Christianity is just it's a set of rules, historical patterns, and things that have happened philosophically and in life, in people's lives, that pushed us in order to believe, in this God. But just I said this just to say that, yeah, this is a cumulative case. This is not just, oh, these people did this and therefore God exists and you need to believe in this God in particular. It's an incredible cumulative case, and it starts, I don't want to disturb the conversation, but for me, when it comes to these questions is, man, like there are 11 people here. Like 11 people, are there 11 entities that came out of nothing with minds? We can say the same thing about Islam or atheism or whatever. Like we're talking that there is something here. Mm-hmm. So that is what my foundational thinking about everything is kind of a cumulative case. So, now if we pinpoint at this exact question that you're asking, is it this, how important it is, that 11 people said all these things? I think it's very important, because what they were talking about was kind of against what they were living in this moment, contextually, socially, and culturally. They found themselves between Second Temple Judaism. It was this period before the coming of Christ, and then the Greco-Roman culture, mm-hmm. plus the Roman Empire on top of it, and all this suffering that was happening there. And then there comes the Sermon of the Mount, the transformation of the thinking that was happening in the Jewish tradition. It wasn't just getting rid of it. It was just, this is actually the meaning of it. And this is being now exposed to you. And it wasn't actually a lot of concepts or anything, abstract thinking. It was, this is the why I've come to the world, so that you see the way I live. You live the same. This is the way you actually pursue God first, which is very interesting. It emphasizes a lot about the concepts of human flourishing, meaning, this is the way you react when you see poor people. This is the way you react when someone is calling you names. This is the way, it's very empirical. You can test it. It's not very abstract. And we know also that these people died and something happened, because, here I am talking about all of this. And of course, many people have done horrible things with this. The same with secular thinking, the same with any other topic that you can believe, that you can think of. So I think that there are many good reasons about those 11 people dying and talking about this,
Sure. So you were, a little while back, you were talking about something. Have you ever heard of Plotinus?
Sorry, would you repeat
Plotinus?
that? Plotinus? Yes. Neoplatonism? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he wrote a lot about trying to perceive the one, and in this case, the one being something like the God that you're describing. And as he wrote, as soon as you put the one into human, in terms that humans can understand, right? It's as soon as you conceptualize them, as soon as you divide him up in such a way that a finite being can understand the one or God, you've lost it, right? You've no longer. You might be describing something adjacent to it, but you've lost sort of the sort of the real essence of it. It's we see a lot in Hindu philosophy, the same sort of notions, where when you try to like wrap your mind around it, that process, it escapes you, right? Because it is eternal, it is infinite.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a question about all of this, Joel. So then, when thinking about God, and this is a question I love asking to my secular friends, do you think that the believe in God and try? I know you're capable of doing this, of course, because you're a philosopher. I'm so lucky to have a conversation with you. So put aside the things that people have done with the concepts, with it, with the believing God. I mean, we both agree, horrible things and incredible things. I don't know actually if you believe that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you believe that people have done incredible things with it?
Well, I mean, I, I'm a bit of a socialist, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I couldn't hold like sort of radical egalitarian positions without acknowledging that, hey, the Soviet Union did terrible, heinous things, right? Yeah. China has done the Great Leap Forward. Mao has done terrible things, and I would like to think that I extend that, you know, the same courtesy to everybody else, right? No ideology is no ideology worth its salt that has had any sort of real application in history. It has its hands free of blood. I mean, even if we look at something like sort of just like middle of the road liberalism, like British liberalism, even that has caused the deaths of Native Americans, has caused the death of Indians, British colonization of India.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to know. So one thought about what you just said is I like that a lot, because when I see the horrible things that people have done in the name of Christ, for example, and then you see the same with secular governments and anything that you can think of, actually the common denominator has always been humanity.
Right.
So that is something, I don't want to push it that much, but I want to be honest with you, because that's why we're having this conversation. This is actually something that pushed me to believe in Christ, because he actually came to tell us that there's something wrong inside the human hearts. And perhaps that this could be tested, because if we see it happening, no matter what you look at, where they're humans, there are problems. So, so the question that I wanted to ask you then, as a philosopher and secular thinker, the belief in God itself, do you think that this belief is a possible hypothesis, a far-fetched idea, or complete utter irrationality? And I don't want to just put it as a trichotomy. I don't know if that's a word actually. Trichotomy, or three.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are more options there. So what do you think when you see me, for example, Peter believes in God? Do you think this is complete utter irrationality, or there's something there?
So are you talking about sort of a minimum God, like the minimum amount of things that you could affirm and still call a God? Like for me, like a God of Spinoza, like a non-interventionist first cause of the universe. Mm-hmm. If that's the kind of God that you're talking about, I don't think that is necessarily an irrational belief at all.
Okay.
Right. And I wouldn't even call Christianity necessarily, gosh, I guess I don't like the connotation of irrational.
Yeah, if you find another word, Joel, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, irrational without rationality. No, I think that Christians, they're very smart Christians that are completely rational insofar as they're using their ability to reason to come to their God belief. I think that their reasoning is not compelling, right? But to me, irrational makes it sound like it's without thought. But I don't think that's the case.
So in terms, how do you say this? Instead of thinking about this, the God of Spinoza, that it's everywhere, or for example, deism, what's your thoughts about the God that is actually the creator of everything, and with whom one can have a relationship?
Okay. So now we're
Yes,
now we're
we are. I'm being specific about that one. I would like to hear your thoughts about that one.
yeah, in intercedent God. I can never argue against personal revelation. No, nobody can argue against personal
Mhm.
revelation, right? Um, I can compare it to other people that have had similar sorts of claims, right? In perhaps vastly different contexts, but I can never say, no, I know for a fact that you don't have a relationship with God or whatever you want to describe it. Um, Again, I don't necessarily think that that's compelling evidence for somebody else to base their beliefs on, but it's not something that I can argue against, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't, and if I can't argue against it, if I can't disprove it, for me at least, I can't really fault somebody for holding the belief.
Yeah.
We can make some appeals to probability, something like that, but if you
Yeah.
can't yeah, if I can't categorically disprove it, I can at least, at the very least, I can leave room for some pragmatism, right?
Mhm.
If believing in God really helps you, if believing in God keeps you sober, if you have a problem with substance abuse, who am I to tell you that you shouldn't be believing in this God, right? Who am
Mhm.
I to tell you you're irrational?
Yeah. So, talking about probability, I wanted to mention something, Joel. I remember when I was thinking about uh, Christianity and all the claims, and I thought, I think last time I checked, there was around 4,200 religions in the world, something like that. And when it comes to probability, and I was an atheist, I thought, well, the probability says that at least there's something, because there are 4,200 religions in the world. Like, there seems to be a yearning there. There seems that there is a need, or there is something there for people to actually come to the conclusion that beyond the material world there's something else. So people seem to come to that conclusion. Does that say something to you?
Well, it says to me that there are things we don't understand, right?
Mm,
Um, it says to me that there are sort of psychological human needs that perhaps are best met by way of mysticism.
mm.
And I don't want to use mysticism. I know that can have a negative
That is
connotation,
okay. That is
but
okay.
yeah, I'm just, when I say mysticism, I mean appealing to something beyond oneself or beyond one's own understanding. I mean, if we look at the works of like Jung or Joseph Campbell, he wrote a book called Hero with a Thousand Faces. There definitely seems to be like sort of these archetypal human beliefs, perhaps about God, perhaps about nature. Um, I think that there is a way to explain lots of them, though, right?
Mm,
Like
mm.
the most clear-cut example I could give is like a sort of man not understanding thunder and conjuring up Thor, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, I might chalk it up to something like that.
Mm. Yeah, when thinking about those, concepts of gods existing, just like, for example, the god of thunder, it always brings back some thoughts about, when we actually got to describe what thunder is and the way we can expect it. After we describe it, thunder's still there, and we're just having a mind that is a given, and then a universe that is working in a way that is another given. So even though we actually go, oh yeah, the thunder is happening, and we can describe it, and we can expect it when certain conditions reunite, we can expect it that is going to happen. There's something still interesting there, which is, yeah, we describe it, but thunder's still there. If we get to the bottom of it, do we actually know what thunder is? And of course, I'm not saying that I believe in zoos. I don't, but it is just such an interesting. hmm, it's a very interesting way to think about the world. Well, Joe, this has been an incredible talk. And before we leave, I just want to ask you this question. Just after finishing this talk, um, concerning the things that you think about the world today, I think you answered this question, but just to as a takeaway also, can you be wrong about the things that you think about? And what are some ways or a way for you to know it?
Mhm. So first off, to the viewer at home, you're awesome. Really, like taking the time out of your busy day, your quarantine day, to wrestle with these with us together, Pedro, myself, you, is special, and it's incredible, and it humbles me. Um, so when it comes to your question, I think there's lots and lots of things that I could be wrong about. I think that we have tools that we probably both agree on, um, to investigate whether I'm wrong, when I say that it's going to rain tomorrow, or whether we should go to a war with Iran, or whatever other sort of natural question you want to conjure up. I think when you chase back the why far enough, I think that you get to a point where, at least for me, I don't think I can know if I'm right or wrong. I have no way to investigate it, and I have a hard time even imagining a way that it could be investigated in theory. And I think when you get to that point, at least as a person that doesn't affirm a God belief, as a person that can't appeal to like revelation from an all-knowing being, I think you chase those beliefs back, and you can't know if they're wrong, but you assume that they're right, that they're true. Now there are other accounts of epistemology that aren't foundationalism. I don't want to get too far into them, but so basically, coherence theory is the idea that if all it's circular reasoning, right? But it's like a big circle. So if your ideas generally cohere to one another, you have some warrant in saying that that they're true. But that's just an interesting aside if people want to look it up on.
Well, thank you for that.
Encyclopedia.
Thank you for that, Joel. I'll try to answer the question as well. Am I wrong, and how can I know it? Well, you know what? I think I can be wrong, definitely. One of the things about Christianity that I love is that I think we mentioned this one time when we talked. I think it's actually falsifiable because it's truly rooted in history, and even the Apostle Paul said it. If Christ didn't resurrect, we would be the ones that should be pitied the most. Then also, I think I could be wrong in many ways about Christianity. That definitely, but I'm thankful that I believe that Christ was in the world walking, just giving us the incredible ethical foundation and the prerogatives of human flourishing to really bring humanity to a new level of understanding and peace. So I can be wrong about many things about the way I understand God. I can be wrong, and that's why I study every day, and that's why I actually challenge my ideas very often. And the way I can know if I'm wrong about my beliefs, that is also an interesting question. Through conversation, by reading things that challenge my ideas constantly, by respecting both the Christian and the secular tradition and great thinkers that have put thoughts there for me to actually just to read them, and I don't have to do the work to get there, right? I'll be honest too about this. I think I am not wrong about thinking that there's something. I don't think the answer for the system, the universe, I don't think the answer comes from the inside. I don't think so. So I think there's something, definitely. Now, in terms of how to understand what that is or who that is, I believe that this, of course, that is the God that Jesus Christ portrayed for all of us. But then, in order to understand all of this and how all of this unfolds in people's lives, there is a huge conversation there to have. So, yeah.
As it turns
Well,
out, the conversation's fun to have. So,
yeah, definitely.
and I want to throw one last caveat out there. I
Yeah.
wouldn't consider my atheism to be a properly basic belief. I think that I could be wrong about my atheism,
Mm-hmm.
and for a lot of the same ways that you described, I think it's important that we go out and challenge ourselves. And
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because it is it's very sad for me when someone says, in conversations, oh, she or he or I am an atheist, the only thing that that is saying about that person is that there is no God, and period. There's so many levels about human life that's that what atheist is not saying. So definitely, there's so much to explore there. So yeah, definitely, atheism is just no God. I mean, after that, we can turn to beliefs and experiences and right and wrong, and so there's so many things and about human life that um, goes beyond the belief or not in God. So that is very interesting too. Well, Joel, thank you very much for being here, and thank you also for mentioning our viewers. That was very nice, and I am also very happy for those people that spend time listening to this, and I hope that they can bring these conversations also to their families, to their friends, to Christian friends, secular friends, and other religion friends. I think this is important. We need to keep searching and also focusing on the things that we have in common. Actually, there's something that we have in common that is crazy, that we're all humans. that is so, like, we take it for granted, but wow, and we all laugh, we'll smile, we'll cry, we'll have pain. It's just so interesting. But so for everyone, I'll have some descriptions below concerning some of the things that we mentioned during the conversation, so that you can tap into those things. For example, nihilism or foundationalism, and I'll help with that with the description on the YouTube video. I want to thank you again, Joel, for being so incredibly open-minded, and open-minded in the sense, because that could mean so many things. Open-minded in the sense of, let's have conversations about anything. Let's talk about it. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your past. And we look forward to having more conversations with you. And thank you very much for being with us.
I had a blast. It really flew by. I looked at my clock. I couldn't believe it was.
I know. Well, thank you very much, guys. And I'll see you next time with more conversations. Bye, Joel.